I've noticed there's a division between my contemporaries in terms of traditionalism and contemporary practice in painting. There are some painters who are solely interested in painting like the old masters, and there are some painters that are interested in doing anything but that. And of course, there's any range of behaviors and opinions in between those two ends of the spectrum as well. On one hand, traditionalist artists have an appreciation for art history and historical methods of making art, and objectively, that does require skill and mastery of an art form. It requires a huge amount of time and dedication to the art form of painting. And that's not to say that contemporary practice is completely unskilled, but that is part of it. There's a lot of unskilled art out there, and there's a lot of intentionally low skill art out there, or even art created by artists that do have skills, but they are intentionally scaling back on some of that skill to avoid academic conceptions of art. Traditional painting is beautiful. Contemporary paintings can be beautiful as well. I think the issue is when we rely too much on either one of those things, where our thinking becomes too black and white about the subject. If you are solely perpetuating traditions, then you're not really offering anything new. You're not bringing anything new to the table. And there's definitely value in keeping traditions of the past alive. I'm not disputing that at all. But the contemporary practice camp does have a point when they say that it's all been done before. On the other hand, if your primary concern is innovation without substance, then that also becomes a problem. The academic art style tends to lend itself more easily to things like representational art and narrative, which can be very important and can help us to relate to the art in a more intimate way, especially figurative art. Figurative art in general is usually more touching because we as humans can insert ourselves into that art. We can compare ourselves to the people depicted. We can relate with them or not relate with them. We have the option to observe other humans in art. Non representational forms of art don't have that luxury. I mean, you've got figurative expressionism for sure, but when it comes to more abstract forms of art, you tend to sacrifice certain aspects like narrative in order to have perhaps a more expressive representation of emotions or more abstract concepts, and that's fine too. The issue with contemporary practice, in my opinion, is that if we become too concerned with novel means of creating art and less about the finished product, or if the finished product is less relatable and less coherent and less aesthetically pleasing, then what was that innovation worth? What was the point of doing something new if the end result is just not as good? So I think the key in 2025 to being a good painter is to just be open minded in terms of what your options are, in terms of learning historical practices and being open to contemporary notions of creating. I think anybody would be selling themselves short to be ignorant of historical art practices. And likewise, it's not beneficial for an artist to um, be closed minded to any new means of making art or mark making in particular. I mean, you can make very traditional looking art while incorporating mark making techniques that are not at all historical. One last danger about contemporary practice that I do want to point out, though, is the preoccupation with shortcuts. Um, they don't work. You know, lots of artists are trying to figure out ways to bypass skill development, and it just never works. There's no substitute for actually understanding how to paint. There's no substitute for draftsmanship. There's no substitute for the ability to see and interpret things as simple shapes. There's no way that you can possibly replace historical art practices that were in place for a purpose. There's a reason why people would learn to draw from life and from the live model and study proportions and things like that. So this is a subject that I could speak on endlessly, but that is a brief summary of my idea on contemporary painting practices. Learn art history, learn historical painting practices, but don't go too far in either direction of being closed-minded, whether it be in terms of traditionalism or progressivism in art making. Do both, learn both, be open-minded to both. I think that's really the only way that you can make art that's actually interesting.